It started as an ordinary morning, markets opening, bread baking, slaves fetching water from the fountains. By nightfall, over 2,000 people would be dead, buried alive under 19 feet of ash and stone in less than a single day. They didn't see it coming, not really. The mountain that loomed over their city had been silent for so long, most residents didn't even know it was a volcano. And when it finally woke up, it didn't just destroy Pompeii. It preserved it, freezing the final moments of an entire Roman city in place, exactly as they died, for archaeologists to uncover 2,000 years later. This is the true story of the last day of Pompeii, told through the only eyewitness account that survived. And it begins with a strange cloud on the horizon that no one in the city understood. By the year 79 AD, Pompeii was a thriving Roman city on the Bay of Naples, home to roughly 12,000 people. Wealthy merchants built elegant villas decorated with intricate frescoes. Bakeries lined the streets. Bathhouses, brothels, and marketplaces buzzed with daily commerce. Towering above the city stood Mount Vesuvius, green, fertile, and as far as anyone in Pompeii knew, completely dormant. Vineyards grew along its slopes. Farmers cultivated its rich volcanic soil without a second thought. No one living in Pompeii had ever witnessed the mountain erupt. In fact, Roman writers of the era didn't even classify Vesuvius as an active volcano. The concept wasn't fully understood yet. 17 years earlier, in 62 AD, a massive earthquake had struck the region, damaging buildings across Pompeii and neighboring Herculaneum. Most residents interpreted it as an unrelated natural disaster. Reconstruction continued for years afterward. They had no way of knowing that earthquake was a warning sign. A pressure building deep beneath their feet, with nowhere left to go but up. The morning began like any other. According to Pliny the Younger, a young Roman writer staying across the bay in Misenum with his uncle, Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet, nothing seemed unusual at first. Then sometime around midday, Pliny the Elder's sister rushed to alert him. A strange cloud had appeared above Vesuvius, rising in a shape unlike anything witnessed before. Pliny the Younger later described it in a letter as resembling an umbrella pine tree, a long trunk of ash and smoke shooting miles into the sky, then spreading outward at the top into a massive canopy. Pliny the Elder, driven by scientific curiosity as much as duty, ordered a boat prepared. He intended to observe the phenomenon up close, and as reports of people trapped near the base of the mountain reached him to attempt a rescue, he would never return. Across the bay in Pompeii itself, the sky was beginning to darken in the middle of the afternoon. Ash had begun falling like snow, and the ground, ever so slightly, had begun to tremble. For the residents of Pompeii, the initial hours of the eruption were terrifying, but survivable. Pumice stones, light, porous volcanic rock, rained from the sky, accumulating on rooftops and streets. Some residents fled immediately, grabbing what possessions they could carry and rushing toward the city gates. Archaeological evidence later revealed skeletons found with jewelry, coins, and even house keys still clutched in their hands, people who intended to return home once the danger passed. Others sheltered indoors, believing the ash fall would subside, just as it had during smaller volcanic disturbances in the past. This was, by far, the deadliest miscalculation of the entire disaster. As the hours passed, the accumulating pumice grew heavier. Roofs across Pompeii began collapsing under the weight, crushing those who had chosen to remain inside for safety. And this was still only the beginning. Vesuvius was not finished. What came next would prove far more lethal than falling stone. In the early morning hours of August 25th, Vesuvius's eruption entered its most catastrophic phase. The volcanic column that had been sustaining itself for nearly 18 hours finally collapsed under its own weight. When it did, it unleashed what modern volcanologists call a pyroclastic surge, a superheated cloud of ash, gas, and rock fragments. Moving down the mountainside at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, with temperatures reaching several hundred degrees Celsius. For anyone still remaining in Pompeii, there was no outrunning it. Modern excavations have uncovered the bodies of victims frozen in their final moments, some huddled together in basements, some caught mid-stride while fleeing, preserved in haunting detail by the ash that encased them almost instantly. The heat was so intense that death, in many cases, was nearly immediate, a small mercy amid an otherwise horrifying end. Across the bay in Stabie, Pliny the Elder had reached shore, attempting to calm those sheltering with him even as ash and pumice fell around them. Historical accounts describe him remaining composed, even resting, in an effort to reassure the terrified group around him. He would not survive the night. Later accounts suggest he succumbed to the toxic fumes, collapsing on the beach as the eruption continued to rage across the bay. By the time the eruption finally subsided, Pompeii had vanished beneath approximately 19 feet of volcanic ash and debris. The nearby city of Herculaneum fared even worse, buried under material that, in some areas, exceeded 60 feet in depth. Estimates suggest as many as 2,000 people died in Pompeii alone, though the true number across the entire region remains uncertain, given how thoroughly the area was buried and later forgotten. For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii essentially disappeared from historical memory, its exact location lost beneath layers of hardened ash and subsequent development. It wasn't rediscovered until 1748, when excavation work in the region uncovered structures still remarkably intact beneath the volcanic layer, buildings, frescoes, and eventually, the haunting outlines of human bodies preserved by the very disaster that had killed them. Archaeologists later developed a technique of pouring plaster into the voids left by decomposed bodies within the hardened ash, creating eerily precise casts of victims in their final positions: a mother shielding a child, a group huddled together, a man appearing to shield his face from the heat. Everything historians understand about the sequence of the eruption comes largely from two letters written years later by Pliny the Younger, at the request of the Roman historian Tacitus. Pliny had remained in Misenum throughout the disaster, describing tremors so severe that carts rolled back and forth on level ground, and a darkness so complete that he described it as not like a moonless or cloudy night, but like being in a closed room with the lights out. His account remains the only first-hand description of the eruption to survive from antiquity, a document so precise and scientifically valuable that volcanologists today use the term Plinian eruption to describe this specific type of violent, high-column volcanic event named directly in his honor. Pliny the Younger survived. His uncle did not, and through his letters, an ordinary Roman disaster became one of the most thoroughly documented catastrophes of the ancient world. Here is what makes the story of Pompeii so haunting, even 2,000 years later. The same disaster that destroyed an entire city is the exact reason we know so much about how ordinary Romans actually lived. Bread still sits in ovens, carbonized but intact. Graffiti remains scratched into walls, jokes, complaints, declarations of love, exactly as they were written the day before the eruption. Dinner tables were found set, mid-meal, frozen in the instant that everything stopped. Pompeii wasn't simply destroyed. It was preserved, a city interrupted mid-sentence, giving us an unfiltered window into daily Roman life that no other archaeological site has ever matched. The people of Pompeii didn't know they were living through history's final chapter for their city. They thought it was simply another Tuesday. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part of this story, not the ash, not the heat, but how ordinary that final morning felt right up until it wasn't. So here's a question worth sitting with. If the last day of your life looked exactly like every other day before it, would you even notice it was the last one? Let me know what you think in the comments.